so much happening as teams look to get deals over the line. Means we've got lots to discuss in the company of a man who's watched more European football matches than we've all had hot dinners, Andy Brassel, and our reporter James Green, who's across all the deals as they happen, and he's wearing his finest high school bully jacket as well. Love it, James. Right, coming up, more injury woe for Thomas Frank, who says they want to sign a forward this month after losing Richarlison for 7 weeks. Will a compromise be found for Lucas Paquetá, who wants to leave West Ham? We've got a development on his future coming up. Arne Slot is short of players at right back and also has questions over the future of Andy Robertson. We'll hear from the Liverpool boss later this hour. And Mikel Arteta also speaks to the media this morning. Find out what he's got to say before 10 a.m. Right, morning guys, morning to you all at home as well. Let's get straight to our first done deal of the day. Donyell Malen is now a Roma player. James, talk us through the deal.
Yeah, look, this is a player that surprised a few of us. The fact he looked like he was on the move this week, and he is on the move. It's gone through. An undisclosed fee is what Aston Villa have come out and said themselves, but we understand the fee's made up of a loan fee with an obligation to buy at the end of the season. A real surprising one, this one. He's had a pretty good season. I think it's 7 goals already. He's contributed 2 assists too, as almost a backup to Ollie Watkins, but he's got that versatility across the front line. We understand the player, though, wants to play more as a number 9, and Aston Villa see this as an opportunity to redistribute that funds into different areas of the squad. But Andy, I was surprised. Were you surprised when this one went through?
A little bit. I'm always surprised when continental teams are buying Premier League players, and especially players from the top end of the Premier League. But now I think we're really seeing the PSR pinch. Whereas before, if you look at it, you think there is no way a club from, say, Italy can afford a top Premier League player or a player who can play in a top Premier League team on Premier League wages. But the reality is, I think this deal is financially motivated for Aston Villa. He would have been really useful to keep for the second half of the season. I think the fact that you can use Malen from the start, you can use him off the bench, you can use him centrally, you can use him wide in any of those places. I guess the thing is, you talked about him wanting to play in the middle more. I'm sure that is part of it, but also just to be made important, to feel important. Now, we know Roma have needed strikers and they've needed pace at the front of the team. Gianpiero Gasperini's been talking about that for absolutely ages. Evan Ferguson, obviously, who's coming back from a long injury journey, has struggled a little bit, or even though he's improved in the last month or so. But I think from the moment he arrived at Villa, Malen signs, he leaves another Premier League club in Borussia Dortmund to go to Villa. And then he doesn't end up in the Champions League squad, as Matt was pointing out to us earlier. What does that make you think? Obviously, they had to take the opportunity to sign Rashford and Asensio last winter, and it did them well. But in terms of Malen, you're thinking, was I ever a priority here? Was I ever really an important player to this club? So you can understand it.
And does that surprise you? You know, given we have seen glimpses of what he can do, are you surprised it didn't work out for him?
Yeah, a little bit. But look, I think what's important for Villa is that he's retained his value. So they've been able to sell him for a fair old chunk of change, and this is something they'll probably be able to reinvest in this window, or at least some of it.
All right, Donyell Malen then is a Roma player. It is official. What will Aston Villa do in terms of incomings? Well, you'll hear about it here first. If they do bring anyone in, let's get to Tottenham though. Who've been dealt another injury blow. This time it's Richarlison, who's out for up to 2 months. I know, James, a lot of people don't like hearing this as an excuse, but there is no doubt that Tottenham Hotspur have had some terrible luck with injuries this year.
Yeah, I feel like we're rewinding to last year when we were discussing the exact same issue for Ange Postecoglou with the amount of injuries that he was having to cope with. That was part of his reason for focusing just on one competition, because he felt like he didn't have the squad depth because of the injuries they sustained last season to compete across the board. But this is a current injury list that Thomas Frank's looking at being added to with Richarlison's hamstring injury out for a couple of months, Rodrigo Bentancur potentially out for the rest of the season. Lucas Bergvall will be back a bit sooner, but Mohamed Kudus out for a little while. And the thing with Kudus in particular, plays on that right side, and Tottenham let Brennan Johnson go for £35 million to Crystal Palace. So let the backup go. Dejan Kulusevski still not back. Maddison out for the remainder of the season. Dominic Solanke coming back from injury, but he's been out for a long period of time. So look, it's a difficult situation that he's finding himself in right now.
Yeah, he is. Well, let's hear from the Spurs boss, Thomas Frank, then, on potentially signing a forward this month.
It is what it is. We need to deal with what we have, but of course it's Villa, let me put it that way, brought a little bit more experience and quality on the pitch that we were able to do there. But hey, it is what it is. We are in the market, as I said many times, to see if we can improve the squad. But it needs to be something that we improve the squad short and long term. It needs to be that decision. It can't only be for the next 4 months. We need to think bigger picture as well. But of course, we know that we have a few offensive players down in that aspect.
So Frank says they are in the market. And it is, Andy, forward areas, we saw from that graphic, that are particularly decimated. But January is a notoriously tough month to do business. So he talks there about short-term and long-term. Are there many options out there of the required standard that will improve Spurs?
No, I don't think so. Because if you're looking at them going out there and getting someone who's going to really improve them instantly, you're looking at a permanent deal for a lot of money. They're not going out there and getting Samu off Porto in January. It's just not possible. It's really difficult to piece together a deal of that level, even if Tottenham and their board would sanction it. I think the biggest problem really is the fact that Paratici is going to Fiorentina. So you have to ask how much of his focus is on Tottenham. I think whatever the contracts are, it's not unreasonable to ask that, because Fiorentina have got a big transfer window ahead of them. They're in massive trouble at the bottom of the table, and that's why he's being given the power going forward that he is being given, and part of the reason behind his decision to go there. And I think as well, you look at Tottenham, and as you say, Matt, the injury list is extraordinary. So really, maybe they're looking at loaning someone, because at the moment, if everyone comes back, the squad is kind of a mess, really. So really what they need to do, I think, look at players who are in trouble, who really want to get to the World Cup. So players who aren't playing at their place, and they can do Tottenham a favour short term and long term. That they can do themselves a favour. I think a permanent deal strikes me as excessively expensive and doesn't really feel like good squad planning. So it's a bit of a difficulty there. I think you look at Juventus, perhaps, who've got a real overflow of forward players. Perhaps there's an opportunity there. That's one of the reasons they ended up getting Kolo Muani, of course, because they have that log jam at the front. So maybe a Lois Openda, someone like that. But there's not an obvious solution out there, I don't think.
Yeah, look, I think listening to that and listening to what you're saying, I think you're right in terms of a short-term loan. The one thing that Thomas Frank's been very clear about, speaking to him over the last couple of months at times, he said that he doesn't want to bring in, this is his words, he doesn't want to bring in someone who's going to save his backside. So look, we look at the results, we look at where Tottenham are in the Premier League. They are struggling right now, but he doesn't want to make a mistake that perhaps Tottenham have made recently, in recent transfer windows, where they're bringing in a player because they feel they're desperate, because they're desperate to pick up points or get themselves to the next level. They want to make sure that they're attacking the transfer window in a smart way, build into the future. So a short-term loan, yes, makes sense to get them out of this injury hole, but a permanent deal rushed in this period of time just feels very unlikely for what they're looking to do as a club, because they're changing their strategy. They're looking for long-term targets. You look at Conor Gallagher coming in, he's 25 years old, been given a 5.5-year contract. They're looking at the next 3, 4, 5 years for him. They're on the verge of signing Brazilian left-back Souza from, was it Flamengo? Is it from Santos? Santos, sorry.
What's the latest on that then? Because
the latest
medical
on that
happened yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah, well, he had his medical yesterday, so we're literally waiting for confirmation on that signature. But this is a 19-year-old left-back who actually, I think we had our South American football expert, Tim Vickery, on, who said that Carlo Ancelotti is actually monitoring him, and he's got a small possibility, if he has a good 6 months, of making Brazil's World Cup squad. So that's a really positive sign for Tottenham, signing a player that's highly regarded, especially by the Brazilian manager. So look, that's the long-term aim of the club. So I'd be shocked, absolutely shocked, if Thomas Frank goes against what he's been talking about and looks to sign a permanent deal that perhaps is, say, a 28, 29-year-old with very little longevity.
Next up for Spurs, potentially big game for both clubs. They are taking on West Ham. And let's speak about the Hammers now, because they are prepared to sell Lucas Paquetá as long as they can loan him back until the summer, which is a very, very interesting development. And he wants to go back to Brazil. Is this potentially a compromise that would suit everyone?
Yeah, look, the way Brazilian football's gone, like, West Ham are lucky to have this option, because of course everyone talks about Lucas Paquetá was someone who Manchester City wanted and wanted to pay 80 million for a couple of years ago. That seems a really long time ago now, and obviously he's been through a lot, but his form has not been fantastic as well. It is quite a difficult decision for West Ham, because they are in a place where obviously they can't sell him for anywhere near that figure, and they're in a place where they desperately need all the help they can get, and he's clearly the best passer of the ball in the team, certainly in an attacking sense. But his head's clearly not here anymore, and they're lucky to have that option. They're lucky that there's so much money in Brazilian domestic football now that they are able to sell him back there for more than pennies on the dollar.
Well, Flamengo in particular have got a lot of money.
Yes, and and of course they've had a very successful season, a very successful year under Felipe Luis, which has augmented that, of course, because they won the Copa Libertadores as well. But I just wonder, especially with West Ham where they are, and especially with the morale around the place, would they be better just to take the money? And maybe they can find an option. Because I don't feel that with the way he's played this season, it definitely sinks them. And, you know, where are they getting that money from elsewhere? I just...
But they're a relegation dogfight, James, aren't they? I mean, you know, what kind of message does that send if you sell one of your best players?
I'm going to disagree, Andy. Look, I get it, the fact that clearly his head is turned. He wants to go to Brazil. He had that FA investigation that has affected him, which he's been quite open about, the psychological ramifications of that. But actually, when we look at his impact on West Ham, despite them having a really bad season, he's still excelling in terms of chances created. We can have a look at that graphic right now, and this is this season. Mateus Fernandes quite close behind him, but it's quite a big jump back to Jarrod Bowen. And before that, you're looking at James Ward-Prowse, who's not even involved now in the first team squad. This is the impact you're losing from a side that is fighting for their Premier League survival now, despite the fact I believe he's not having as maybe good a year as we expect from Lucas Paquetá. He still scored 4 Premier League goals already this season. Well, that's the most he's scored in an entire season while being at West Ham. He's creating more chances than anybody else. So despite maybe him not performing at the levels we expect, he's still clearly better than what they've got. And if it's the difference between, a few million quid selling him now and the summer, but then your Premier League survival, I think for the West Ham hierarchy might be a bit of a no-brainer. I think Nuno be devastated if he loses Paquetá in this window. I think he's a difficult player to replace.
There needs to be a replacement, doesn't there?
But I don't know how you do replace him.
Go and get Thiago Almada from Atletico Madrid. Someone who is going to be a key player for Argentina during the World Cup. You can get him for half the money.
Would he want to come to West Ham and be in a relegation scrap?
Well, he'd want to play before a World Cup. I think it goes back to it goes back to what we were saying before. I think really what Premier League clubs who really need something this window need to look at is who needs us as much as we need them. That's the thing. And you need to look at these players who expect to be important players for their teams at the World Cup, but are not getting a game at the moment.
Could be other outgoings at West Ham as well. Celtic have made an inquiry for the striker Callum Wilson. James, what are the details of that then?
Yeah, look, they've made an inquiry. They're basically testing the waters. They want to see where the player's head's at. Now, we know that it's very, very likely he's going to be leaving West Ham this window. He's had a conversation with Nuno and they've seemingly decided that their futures are separated. West Ham have already brought in 2 strikers in Tati Castellanos and Pablo in this window. It's perhaps surprising. He's played 17 times already for West Ham this season. He's already scored 4 goals. Experienced centre forward who you'd expect in a relegation scrap. You wouldn't mind that experience, but it feels like his future's elsewhere. Be interested to see where he goes, because I think it's Jeff Hendrick we've had on, who is quite close to Callum, knows him a little bit from his time at Newcastle, said that he's desperate to be in the 100 club. He's got 92 Premier League goals right now, so that could be an interesting motivation. But Andy, are you surprised? Like me, I'm really surprised that West Ham are just going, you know what, you're not for us this season.
I guess this is the thing with West Ham, isn't it? You kind of, it's a bit of a split in your mind, because you think they need all the help they can get. And you think that with Wilson, with Paquetá. But on the other hand, there's something seriously wrong that is not just about the quality of the players there. So something needs to change. And perhaps that's atmosphere, perhaps that's everyone who's there really wanting to be there. That's perhaps the thing that really needs to change in January if they're going to get out of it.
Yeah. Interesting to see if any other Premier League clubs do come in for Callum Wilson. We'll wait and see on that one. There's another line at the other end of the pitch for West Ham as well. What can you tell us about Mads Hermansen?
Yeah, just a quick one. Hermansen, signed by Leicester from Leicester for £20 million in the summer, started the first 4 Premier League games. Had only been seen actually last weekend for the next time in the FA Cup against QPR, so it hasn't played much. Interest from clubs in the UK and abroad over a loan deal, but the player, we understand, wants to fight for his place at West Ham, wants to get back into that first team reckoning. So unlikely at this stage, but maybe one to watch towards the end of the window.
All right. Good start. Loads more to come as well on Good Morning Transfers. A reminder, we'll be hearing from Arne Slot and Eddie Howe in the next 20 minutes. But Slot, who has just been speaking to the media.
Arne, first of all, obviously Andy Robertson has spoken about his future. I just wonder what you hope happens with Andy, with him being out of contract, because he says that he has a different role here this season that he's getting enjoyment out of, but ultimately he wants to play.
Yeah, no, I think... oh, you don't have a chair? I think I have to give him a big compliment about the things he said. Very mature, and I could understand everything he was saying. So I think every player should have the same feeling about his current position, and that is that he's not starting every game. But I'm really happy that he also says that he finds joy in the position he's in, and that he also understands how important he is. He's been to this club for all these years, and he definitely still is also in the position where he's in now. And he did play quite a lot of games, not as much as he probably hoped. But the way he's acting, and he's also now comments in the media, is a big compliment and says a lot about him. How good he's been for this club in the past 8.5 years.
Obviously, you're about to get Mo Salah back from the African Cup of Nations as well. I just wonder how much of a positive is that for you, and how do you keep him happy so that there is a distraction again, as there was prior to his departure for the competition?
Now, first of all, he needs to play another big game for Egypt on Saturday. And then he comes back to us, and I'm happy that he comes back because, similar to Andy, Mo has been so important for this club, for me. So I'm happy that that he's back, because it's even if I had 15 attackers, I still would have been happy if he would have come back. But that's not our current situation. So happy to have him back after an important game that he still has to play.
An important game again for you guys. 11 games unbeaten now. What's the next step that you feel you have to take now?
No, ideally it's not 11 games unbeaten, it's 11 wins in a row. That's always where you're aiming for, if that is realistic. It might be for some teams. I think Villa won a lot of games in a row. But from where we were when we conceded the 4th goal against PSV, and then where we are now, I think we're in a much better place. But there's still enough room for improvement, but that room for improvement was there also last season when we were top of the league and top of the Champions League in this period of time.
Thank you.
In the rest of the Premier League season, is Champions League qualification everything for Liverpool? And bearing in mind Liverpool, Chelsea, United, Newcastle, maybe some others are all fighting it out for perhaps 1 or 2 remaining places. How much of a challenge is it?
No, it's a challenge because we're playing in the Premier League, and the teams you were just mentioning have very good teams as well. And we haven't put ourselves in the most ideal position, especially if you compare it to where we were after 6 games. So, but reality is that we are competing with these teams at this moment of time for the 4th position. Because Villa is having such a great season. So yeah. Still a lot to play for us in the league, because we all know how important it is for any club, but definitely also for this club, to qualify for Champions League. That didn't happen 2 or 3 years ago, I think, and that had a big impact financially on the club. So yeah, we are aware of the importance of qualification for Champions League, but that's not only for us, that's for a lot of teams. And we're also aware of the fact that the league is probably stronger than ever. So that is something where we have to do really well in the league, and of course there's the FA Cup and the Champions League to fight for as well.
Okay, a bit of breaking news for you concerning Bournemouth, because they have submitted an offer for the Vasco da Gama winger Ryan for £27.7 million. £75 million even, that's what we understand. Talks over the structure of the package continue between the clubs, but a deal could accelerate quickly. The 19-year-old is seen as one of the most exciting young wingers in Brazil right now. So Bournemouth making moves to potentially find a replacement for Antoine Semenyo. Right, let's move on to Jean-Philippe Mateta. What does the future hold for him? Well, Juventus have made an inquiry about signing him this month. Could he leave with 18 months left on his Crystal Palace contract? Now, James, he's obviously a very key player for them. There's no doubt about that. But 18 months left on the contract. Is there a possibility that Palace could think, you know what, we'll cash in now before his value drops in the summer?
Absolutely no chance.
OK, that's it.
Absolutely no chance. Move on. Look, if we learn anything from Crystal Palace and how they're doing their business, look at the summer with Mark Gahey. They had an opportunity to cash in, made a late U-turn and decided against it. Oliver Glasner putting pressure on Steve Parish to say, no, we need to keep him. We need these players in our group. We're competing in a European competition now this season. They're not going to let him go. For the player, 28 years old, 18 months left on his contract. It's a World Cup year. He wants to be on that plane for France, recently broken into the France squad. You would expect he's still going to be the number one striker at Crystal Palace between now and the end of the season. Why move? Why jeopardise that current situation? But with a year left in the summer, that might be a very different question, because this is a player who might have a big move now to come, because his form's been very good in the Premier League right now. But look, it's interesting as an inquiry. Doesn't surprise me, but Crystal Palace, I'm sure, will knock that back very quickly.
Look, there could be interest coming from Premier League clubs as well this month or in the summer. We know Manchester United have had him on their radar for a while now. What do you think the future holds for Jean-Philippe Mateta?
I'm with James. Nothing's happening this month, because for him, getting in the France squad is everything. And, you know, quite apart from what Wilfried Zaha might have said or might not have said when they were both at Crystal Palace, getting there has really meant a lot to him. And everyone in France said when he got called up, going back to autumn, oh yeah, but when everyone's fit, he won't get in the squad. But he's done everything you need to do. He's taken the opportunities when he's been in the France team, and a little bit like Olivier Giroud back in the day, he's sort of planted a flag as, I am a guy who's an alternative to all these other quick mobile forwards we have, be they Mbappe, Doué, Dembélé, who can play in all these different spots. I can be your reference point, your number 9. Even Hugo Ekitike is not thought of as quite that player, even if he's going to be in the squad as well. So look, Mateta's doing everything you need to do, especially in modern football. You can't imagine everyone's going to be fit by the time you get to the World Cup. You know, injuries happen. So he'd be mad to do anything other than stay at Palace, scoring in the Premier League this season. I'm not sure that the absolute top bracket of Premier League clubs is accessible to him, given his age.
Really?
And I've maybe a little bit unfair, because obviously he's got enormous ability, and that's been clear.
Do you
since his early
include
days.
Manchester United in that?
I suppose they're on the cusp, aren't they? Because as a club they are, as a team they're not. I think he would be a really interesting signing for them, though. Where would that leave Benjamin Šeško?
Yeah.
I suppose you could argue they've invested so much in him. I don't think Juventus is a great spot for him, because, of course, they've got in so many attacking players this summer. Of course, they'll probably lose Dusan Vlahovic in the summer, who's out of contract. But, you know, they've not really shown themselves as a place to really develop players in recent years. So there's a big question. But as James says, with a year left and maybe a lower transfer fee, maybe there are more options for him over the continent.
OK, for the time being there, we do think that Jean-Philippe Mateta will be staying at Crystal Palace. A reminder of the breaking news. Bournemouth have made their bid for Ryan. It is over £27 million for the Vasco da Gama winger. Next up, Eddie Howe. Transfers. If you're just joining us, Bournemouth have submitted an offer for the Vasco da Gama winger Ryan, worth in total around £27.75 million. The 19-year-old is seen as one of the most exciting young wingers in Brazil right now, so they are starting to spend that Antoine Semenyo money. Newcastle will look to get over the disappointment of their 2-0 defeat to Manchester City in the EFL Cup semi-final first leg when they take on bottom-placed Wolves live on Super Sunday. Eddie Howe has been speaking to the media this morning. Let's have a listen.
Eddie, could you talk to us firstly about Fabian Schär, because he posted on social media that he'd had surgery on the ankle injury. Do you have a clearer time frame of his rehabilitation and when you might expect him back?
Yeah, he did. He had a successful surgery yesterday, which is great news. Everything went according to plan. I think difficult to give a definitive, but I think roughly around 3 months, I think will be the diagnosis that we'll work towards. If it's any quicker, then great. But I think we need to give Fabian now the time to recover. It's quite a serious injury.
The players that you've been able to pick from the last couple of matches, obviously it's been a big physical effort as well, and probably mentally too, because you're back in that period now where games are every 3 or 4 days. What sort of shape do you think everybody is in now? This cycle of relentless football has restarted with a lot more to come.
Yeah, I think, but my personal opinion, there's a bit of fatigue in the Manchester City performance, whether that was physical, mental, after the 120 minutes. And I know not everyone played those minutes, but I just that was my feeling having watched the game live and again. Don't think it was us at our physical absolute best, but I sort of understand from the players' perspective the load they've been under and playing under. It doesn't mean we couldn't have won the game, and we were close to doing so, I thought. But I think now it's a case of between the Manchester City game and Wolves game to really try and freshen the players up, to try and get us at our absolute best. This is a massive game in our Premier League season, in my opinion. We've built good momentum and we want to continue that as long as we can.
And you'll be coming up against a team that has seen an upturn in form recently, haven't they, with some results in the Premier League and in the FA Cup. How do you assess Wolves now, perhaps, compared to a few weeks ago?
Yeah, definitely. I think they're in a better place. I think Rob's a very good manager. He's come in and I think he's given them a clear way of playing, clear structure. And I think they're playing with freedom, actually. I think they're playing some really good football. Statistically, they've been a bit of an outlier this year. Their form has not been statistically as bad as the results that they've got, and that's been all season. So I think they've been unlucky not to have more points. I think from our perspective, we don't underestimate anybody. We respect everyone. We need to make sure that we're mentally in our best place because, as I said, this is such an important game and we can't take anybody lightly.
Eddie, you mentioned the fatigue there from the Man City game. Are you in a position to mix things up ahead of Sunday?
Yeah, it's always an option for us. I think it's always a delicate balancing act, that, you know, how many changes you make to potentially lose rhythm, and we don't want to do that. I think we've been in a good place, both in terms of front of goal and our mentality to win games, even if they've been really tight, has been really strong. So I think the gap between the Manchester City game and Wolves game gives us hopefully enough time to freshen the players up and to lose any lingering fatigue from the Bournemouth game and make sure that we're ready for this one.
Oh, he talked about Spurs' injury problems, but Newcastle have got real defensive problems as well. We just heard that Fabian Schär out for up to 3 months with his injury. We will get on to the problems in defence in just a moment. But if Newcastle want to generate funds, James, in order to bring people in, which they may have to, we know their financial situation, is Joe Willock someone who could move on?
Yeah, I think he is. There's been a few rumblings of interest from 3 Premier League clubs and a club in Serie A for his services. He's a player that's been at Newcastle actually for a long time. He joined on loan at the start of 2021 before making that move permanent from Arsenal. Just 26 years old as well, so he's still got a bright future. Was a key part of that 22-23 season that got Newcastle back into the Champions League reckoning, but he's really struggled for starts this season and game time this year, and you feel like he's an asset that Newcastle could, look to cash in and use those funds in vital areas, in particular if you look at their injury list, defensively.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you've got a centre-back name we're going to get into in a moment. So save that gold. An option for Newcastle. But in terms of right-back, do they need a right-back as well? Or was Lewis Miley showed in the last few games that they might have enough there with him filling in and Kieran Trippier?
He's done a brilliant job.
Yeah.
Really, really brilliant job. And when you consider he is going to be the future of their midfield, that he has been able to not look like a midfielder playing at right back, but to look like an improving right back his temperament's incredible as well as his ability. He's so impressed by him, and lucky enough to see him at first hand on a number of occasions. The other thing is they've got Kieran Trippier coming back as well, which is the big thing. I think if they were going to go out and buy a right back in this window, they would buy a right back who could play centre back as well. That sort of right back rather than an out and out wing backy sort of player.
And Andy, we had that conversation earlier about other clubs, about Tottenham as well. And with a club so tight on PSR, to take a risk and a gamble just because you've got a slight problem with injuries at a certain area can jeopardise plans in the summer. And we know Newcastle's PSR position is so tight. So again, I'd be really surprised if a player comes in with a short-term thinking for the manager rather than someone who could potentially stay at the club for 3, 4, 5 years again.
Right, I teased you've got a name for Newcastle fans possibly as a centre-back option, and we've got a little part here which is basically who needs what or who needs who. Because Andy's picked out 3 players that he feels should go to certain clubs. Let's start with Danilo Duki from Union Berlin, who you think would be a good fit for Newcastle.
Yeah, and he's been of interest to Villa and Leeds already. Dutch centre-back who's been really good for them in recent years. Tall, dominating, decent on the ball, gets his share of goals from set pieces as well because of his size. He feels like someone who's low cost, only 6 months left on his contract. They're in a comfortable position in the Bundesliga, so I think they would be open to making something from him as well. And he's at the age where he wants to make a big move.
Could he be a starter when everyone's fit for them, if they've got Botman, if they've got Chow, if they've got Dan Burn, if all of their centre-backs are fit?
That's a question, because Fabian Schär is not long-term for them, even when he comes back. You know, he's into his 30s now, and it's great that he signed to stay at the club this summer. But at some point, they're going to have to move on from him and Burn. We don't know if we can completely rely on Sven Botman at the moment, because he's had quite a lot of injuries since he's been there. And I think that's what's allowed Malik Thiaw to become such an important part of the team already. And that's why it's such a brilliant move, because at Milan he had his good bits, he had his less good bits. But now he's arrived at somewhere where he feels important. But they definitely need cover. Probably 2 centre-backs, I think, if you're looking beyond the summer.
A lot of teams want this guy, well, Mark Gay. The question is whether it's in January, whether it's in the summer. Where do you think he should go?
City have to go all the way for him this month, for me. Now, obviously, if you're Mark Gay, you're probably more sensible waiting until the summer, having your pick from really anywhere you want. City have got to make themselves irresistible. And I think when you look at where they are, you look at the fact that Ruben Dias remains a formidable central defender, but has had his fitness and form problems over the last little while. John Stones, we never know if we're getting real John Stones back. Get someone to build your defence around. And he's the guy.
Yeah. Will he go January or in the summer?
Summer, definitely. Again, Oliver Glasner didn't want to sell him in the summer, wanted him for this year. I don't see him relinquishing his captain for the next 6 months. He's a true professional, Mark Gay. I think what's interesting, though, it's been, 2 weeks since the January window's open. He's been open and had opportunities to discuss a contract with clubs outside of England. Well, we haven't heard of anything moving on that front. Now, that surprises me, or certainly tells me that perhaps his future is in this country, which leads you to Manchester City, leads you to Liverpool.
Well don't Liverpool need him just as badly as Manchester City?
Matt, Liverpool needed him in the summer. You know, it's pretty clear. It was obvious, I think, for many they needed him in the summer. Maybe it was obvious a bit too late for Liverpool, hence why they left it so last minute. I have no doubts that will be a regret for Arne Slot and the Liverpool hierarchy that they didn't get that one over the line. He would have made a huge difference to that side. Now Liverpool are going to face competition from Manchester City and Arsenal, who are also showing interest in signing him in the summer. So watch this space. It could be a fire sale. Everybody looking for him.
OK, further up the pitch, Tammy Abraham. Now, we spoke yesterday, potential links that have been reported between Tammy Abraham and Aston Villa. He's currently at Besiktas. Do you think Villa is the place for him to go?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, especially since they've lost Malen. Now, of course, he's a very, very different type of striker, Tammy Abraham, and he's morphed into a different type of striker over the last couple of years since he's recovered from that major injury at Roma. He had that loan at Milan last season, which on paper doesn't look fantastic, but actually in terms of being what Villa need, a striker that doesn't get picked in the 11 every game and yet can hold the ball up, can work incredibly hard and come off the shoulder as well to score a goal. I think he ticks all the boxes for Villa and exactly what they're looking for at the moment. And having a pretty good season in a not great Besiktas team.
There is space now as well with Malen on his way officially to Roma. Still to come in the final part of Good Morning Transfers. Is there a fire sale at Wolves? 4 players could be out the door this month. Plus, Andy's got 4 players from Europe, including Marc-Andre ter Stegen, on the move, possibly to the Premier League. Stay tuned. Departures at Wolves this month. Suddenly, Andy, plenty of rumours swirling around about Wolves players being approached or having interest in them. What can we read into that? Is this a sign that Wolves have decided, OK, we're preparing now for life in the Championship next season?
Clear deck for the Championship. I think that is the obvious conclusion, isn't it? And I think that's fair enough. Look, they have had that little upturn recently. But realistically, if they're going to stay up, they're going to require pretty much Champions League form between now and the end of the season, which is an enormous ask. I think even given that there are teams above them that they can target, it's a lot of ground to make up. So if they want to give Rob Edwards the best possible chance of starting next season well, I think to get everything straight now is not the worst idea in the world, even if it hurts to hear that as a Wolves supporter, I'm sure.
I mean, the thing is there's almost half of the season left. Is that not giving up a little bit too early?
But it's from a business perspective, you've got to look at it and go, hold on a minute, how much of our players going to be worth in the summer when we're likely going to be a Championship side compared to in January, where if teams want these players and want them now, they're always going to pay above the odds in January to get them early and get them mid-season. It's just, for me, it makes business sense to go, look, we've got to build for the Championship. It is so unlikely. I mean, look, I will eat my shoes if Wolves end up surviving. I'll do it right on air here on Sky Sports News.
I don't want to be here when you do that.
No, because it's not going to happen, Matt. Look, it's not going to happen. That's the reality. So the smart way is, look, OK, what players are going to be with us next season? Who's going to be staying with us? Like, for example, João Gomez. He's probably their best player, young player, 24 years old, in the middle of the park. He's being monitored by the likes of Napoli, Atletico Madrid are interested in him. This is a valuable asset of theirs. Is he going to be playing Championship football next season? The answer is no, he shouldn't be playing Championship football because he's much better than that. So how much money can they recoup in January now compared to in the summer when they're relegated? Well, you were speaking earlier, Andy, about clubs outside of England haven't got as much to spend as clubs in England. So if they can maximise it in January, they're going to get more than in the summer.
Right. Marshall Menetzi as well. There's some rumours about him. He's close to going, isn't he? And how about Emmanuel Agbadou?
Yeah, Menetzi's very close to joining Paris FC on loan. Paris FC struggling a little bit in Ligue 1, but they did beat Paris Saint-Germain actually recently in a cup game. But he's had limited playing time just because of the development of Matheus Mane, who's been absolutely superb. He's been a bit of a revelation in such a tough season for Wolves. They only signed him in February for £16 million, so he looks like he's heading out on loan. Emmanuel Agbadou, Besiktas have made a £12 million bid for him. Now, Wolves haven't accepted that yet. Discussions are currently ongoing. Now, he's been away with Ivory Coast at AFCON, hasn't played since mid-December. So that's another player. They're probably looking and going, well, hold on a minute. We could get a decent transfer fee now. It's going to really set us up come the summer because Wolves going to have to attack the transfer market in the summer when they're in the Championship. I say when, I mean that with no disrespect. It's just the reality of the situation that Wolves find themselves in.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned Jorgen Strand Larsen yet. You know, but clearly he's going to be someone who will be targeted too. So if we hear anything definitive about him, we will let you know. He's a real saleable asset, isn't he, for Wolves? Right, we've got three more players that Andy has picked out who are playing in Europe at the moment who could end up in the Premier League. Second part of Who Needs Who is what we're calling it. Right, let's start with the Barcelona keeper, Marc-Andre ter Stegen. Used to be number one. He's suddenly number three, isn't he? Could he find his way to the Premier League? And where could he go?
He needs to find his way somewhere because if he's going to make it to the World Cup with Germany, at the moment, it's just not happening. You know, he's not even on the bench for Barcelona, as you said. He's on enormous wages. He's a sort of legacy player at Barcelona. Bear in mind, he was there when Luis Enrique was there. He was a Champions League winner under Luis Enrique. So he's become a footballing giant there, really. And I think when you're looking for keepers who can actually pass the ball as well, which is such a big deal nowadays, I think that's something that's really important. The risk that you're taking, I guess, with ter Stegen, just like you would with any goalkeeper, is when they come to the Premier League, you have to defend your 6-yard box in a very particular way, and maybe that's a bit of a leap. But look, I think you look at what's happening at Chelsea at the moment, and I know they don't want to buy players above a certain age, but come on. We know Mike Maignan is staying at Milan now. He's getting set to sign a new contract. how much would Marc-Andre ter Stegen improve Chelsea?
Yeah, well, look, they could have gone for Donnarumma. Didn't in the end make that move, did they? Right, let's move on to Pablo Pagis of Lorient. Where could he do a job in the Premier League?
Well, you straight away wonder with Lorient whether Bournemouth have got first dibs. I mean, that's the thing straight away. But he's someone who's just turned 23. He's technically very good. His dad, Mikhail, was a really good player as well. And someone who drifts into those areas round the edge of the penalty box. He can play wide as well. And he is someone who he's got such a high level of technical ability. He scores goals, he creates goals. In a better team, he will absolutely fly. If Bournemouth haven't got him tied up, I don't know what they're doing, really. He is a guy who could do a big job for a lot of Premier League teams.
Okay, running out of time. We'll get on to Nahuel Molina in a moment, our final guy. But breaking news, Fiorentina have agreed a loan deal with Leeds United for the winger Jack Harrison. Harrison is set to join the Italian side for the rest of the season. The loan includes an option to buy for around £6 million. Harrison is set to travel to Florence today to finalise the move. Right, quick word on Nahuel Molina in about 20 seconds. Which club could he go to?
Club that needs a right back. There's no doubt about that. And Liverpool, perhaps, with the injury to Conor Bradley, someone who wants to be part of it with Argentina for the World Cup out of the Atletico Madrid team at the moment.
Very good. That was pretty much bang on.
About
20
15
minutes,
seconds, wasn't it?
Yeah, very good. Andy, always great to have you and always
Thank
come
you.
out of it feeling very, very well educated on all things European football. James, what are you up to now? You're going to go and bully some high school kids?
Absolutely.
I actually really do like that. It's giving me like Beverly
Taking
Hills
your lunch
Cop, Eddie
money.
Murphy vibes. Love it. Right, coming up, Sky Sports Fan Club. It is a Manchester Derby special with Jay Bothroyd. Stay tuned.